It is the E.B.U.N show, a talk show for women and the men who love them. I am Owolabi. Have you heard about seminal plasma hypersensitivity? Yeah, it looks big, like so scientific and technical, but it simply means allergy to semen. You are allergic to sperm. While some will say, hey, kilonjebe. Or some will say, no, it can never happen to me. You know, on this side of the world, we have this habit of once something sounds so big or grand, it can never be me. Or we even say Africans do not have allergy. I've said it before too. You know, when I know that I have hives and it is because of something I've eaten, I'm like, Africans or the blacks do not have allergy. But semen allergy is actually a thing. And this simply means when sperm comes in contact with your skin, any part of your body, you begin to react to it. It presents in form of redness, swelling, itching, you know, just like when a woman says, I have rashes in my vagina. Of course, I mentioned vagina because that is the area that comes in contact the most with sperm. Of course, we know other areas that come in contact with sperm, but that's not the essence of today's topic, right? But it could be mouth. And then you find some people saying they have herpes in their mouth and all of that. It might not be that because there are different kind of illnesses, quote and unquote. I'm careful not to be using medical terms wrongly, that presents in a similar way, or their symptoms are similar, and then you mistake them for other things. So in this case, having an allergy to semen might present as an STD. Guess what? Before you say, no, it's strange, we've not heard it before. I have that allergy. And it took me 10 years to know that I have the allergy. Because guess what? In the early days of marriage, I just find out that when I have sex, my tummy aches. Like the ache is so bad and I can't tell. But one thing I knew for sure, or I know for sure, is anytime it happens, we have sex, my tummy just begins to ache. And then we had a seminar where married people were, and it was about marriage, you know, matters that concern marriage and everything. And we're asked to write our questions. And that brings to mind that when people ask questions, and when their questions are being read out and everybody just laughs and make jests, you never can tell how serious this issue that you just laughed over is to these people. And then I wrote my question that why is it that when I have sex, I have tummy ache, I have rashes, and including the medical doctor that was there and everybody, those organizing the program, just laughed. And their conclusion was, are you sure your husband has not been checking out? Are you sure your husband is not cheating? Are you sure it is not STD? And guess what? It was very awkward for myself and my husband because we were seated there and, you know, and there were all sorts of postulation about whether or not my husband is a cheat, you know, and that discouraged me from even seeking it further. Like, okay, I just kept quiet. I knew it was happening, but I didn't know what it was. And sometimes I have sex and the next morning there's a flare of rashes and I begin to itch. It was confusing, you know. It took 10 years. And I think recently I just picked up my phone. This because I trust my husband to a very high extent. I know different people have different things to say, you know. People will say, hey, there's not one man that doesn't cheat. I mean, pack well, men day. Do you understand? Men day. I'm not saying that every human can err. It's not as if I'm equivocating. Oh, just now you said men day, and then you're saying that men can err. You as a woman too, you have the tendency to err. So let's not even bring that topic of I trust my husband to a certain level. So I knew that there was more to this thing. And guess what? I want to address medical professionals at this point because you have to also be careful. I don't know how doctors have been trained these days, but I think some doctors have to do more. Do not just assume, because I also tried to seek medical help. And there was this, you know, if it was a woman whose head wasn't correct, I would have broken my own home. there was just this subtle allusion to the fact that my husband could be cheating. Let me even give you one interesting gist. So I can't even remember what exactly took me to the sonographer, right, to take my abdominal scan. So I don't know what it was that took me. I had IUD in place. And of course, even without being in the medical profession, you know that if you have IUD, if proper care is not taken, you can be susceptible to maybe some, what time will it be now? Infection. Yes. And so I think he saw some spotting and everything. In the first place, it is not a sonographer's job to begin to interpret your scan to you. You do your scan, you can have interaction here, but if you are not being asked, please do not give your interpretation or do not give your opinion. And he sees something and he says, where's your husband? I need to see him. And I'm like, what do you need to see my husband for? And he goes, we need to have a man-to-man conversation. There's something I'm saying. I'm like, what? Eventually, when I saw, and they said maybe there was an infection and all of, eventually I got back to the doctor and the doctor said, you have an IUD. That could be the reason. And then there's this idiotic sonographer who is already putting it in my mind that my husband could be cheating. He didn't say it directly, but I'm not a baby. Now, let's get to the actual discussion for the day, because we might not be able to control other people's folly. But I'm saying all this because you're a woman. You just always want to believe the worst about your man. I'm not saying trust 100% because it could be both ways. You have rashes. I've said that it can present as STD. But you see, I said I went to the hospital. And if it had been STD, I would have asked my husband because I did not go anywhere, you know. But it wasn't. But I struggled with that. And guess what? Truth be told, at some point I started thinking, could it be my husband really? Because I didn't know, ignorance, I didn't know there was anything called seminal plasma hypersensitivity. So recently I just picked my phone and I was going to search. There has to be something like this because I noticed that on days when we have sexual intercourse and I stand up to wash immediately, it doesn't flare up as much. But on a day I'm tired and I just relax and there's a spread of the semen, all the parts where the semen moved, I'm going to have reaction. So I knew it had something to do with it. And I Googled and voila, there is something called allergy to semen or being allergic to sperm. And I Googled what the symptoms are. Itching, redness, flaring, you know, exactly the same thing you would have if it was some cases of sexually transmitted diseases. And then I go further to say, is it possible for this allergy to cause abdominal pain? Guess what I've found? A capital yes. Matter of fact, do you know that this allergy could cause infertility in some people? Now, before the medical gurus come for me, it is not directly responsible. So here is how the allergy works. The allergy is you are actually allergic to the protein in the semen. Do you understand? The semen contains a high level of protein. And so if you're allergic to protein, you're going to have such allergy. So I've always known that I am quite sensitive. My friends with whom I went to school, they know that with simple things, with simple toilet soaps, I could start breaking out on the face. There was one that got so bad that my skin was tearing. So I knew not to just follow the bandwagon of people to just use anything. So I know that I'm quite sensitive to a number of things. It's just that I do not believe myself to be that soft person who is just now allergic to this, allergic to, so I used to form gangster, rough it, and all of that. So this allergy has to do with the protein in the semen. And so it is not like it is that makes you infertile. No, people who have this allergy are not infertile. I have my 2 babies. But this is how it could work. You are allergic to the semen. The semen comes in contact with your body. Your antibodies see a strange thing and they begin to fight against it in a layman's language, right? Because just the same way your body tries to fight by bacteria, malaria, and everything, the same way these antibodies would interpret this semen because your body is reacting to it and they try to fight it off. So if you are a woman, you've been experiencing this, you've gone to the hospital, they say you do not have an STD, this could be another thing you have. And of course, there are solutions. You can immediately stand up and wash with mild soap. I know that you're not supposed to wash your coochie with soap, but there are very mild ones and you just rinse it off immediately. You can as well just use ordinary water. Just make sure that immediately you enjoy this romantic activity, you get off. Do not be lazy, because some of you sleep off with it. I don't even know how to do that well. But you can be so tired or so enjoyable and then you just want to sleep. For you who has this allergy, it doesn't belong to you, Kotosie. You will rise up, carry yourself and go to the bathroom and wash immediately. Make sure that every bit of it, sometimes though, it doesn't come out. You know that after you have washed, it still comes out gradually. But do your best to wash so that it is minimal. There are also other medical interventions that you can use. I do not want to be the one to prescribe to you. I'm hoping that I'll be able to engage a doctor on this who will tell us how to deal with this allergy. Now that I've brought this knowledge to you, at least one level of ignorance is taken out. If not for you directly, it might be for another person. And so when someone comes to confide in you that you're experiencing this kind of thing, you don't say, it's your husband, oh, what is she? No, that's not the case. In this case, it could just be that you are allergic to semen. So I want to ask you, have you experienced it? I've shared my own vulnerability with you. And I also know that a lot of women suffer in silence because, you know, especially we Africans, we can be so superstitious about a lot of things. So you have sex with your husband and then you have tummy ache. You don't want to be seen as a problematic wife. You don't want to be seen as someone who has maybe a curse over their lives. And so you are living in silence. No, not everything is the work of the world, yo.
So what we call the seminal plasma, let me just explain. When a man ejaculates, okay, comes, not, release, whatsoever you call it in a local parlance, what a man releases is not just sperm. What comes out, the fluid that comes out is sperm and other things. So part of these other things are materials or substances that are proteinous in nature, and because of that they have ability to trigger reaction in the body. Now for people with seminal plasma hypersensitivity, 50% of them can even elicit reaction from the first encounter. So it does not mean you're a virgin or not. There are virgins that the first time they're going to have sex, they are going to react immediately. And you will agree with me that this is unusual. Why? Because most hypersensitivity reaction, the first exposure to whatsoever triggers it does not elicit any response. Okay. In medical terms, we call that an amnestic response. It's just as if you are living in a particular place and a close neighbor of yours on this day, after exchanging words, decide to eat you, and you're like, okay, you will allow this pass, but next time that this man comes and try this, you are going to give him a full-blown tactics of war. The same thing happens in the body. So most times when people are reacting, is not necessarily the first time they are getting exposed to it. They've been exposed to a component of that. The body just store it as a memory and say, okay, next time I see this, I'm going to react. But when it comes to seminal plasma hypersensitivity, you may react as a lady even the first time you are experiencing a man, and this time around I mean your husband, ejaculating into you. And so before I deviate, the reaction is not to sperm. the reaction is to the protein material in the semen. Like I said, so the semen is like a soup or stew with meat, Maggi, onions, talk about all the flavors and spices. And the meat is the sperm. So most times the focus is always on the sperm, but that's not the only thing that happens during ejaculation, or that's not the only thing that is released during ejaculation. And they've discovered that this reaction is as a result of other proteins, okay, in that particular biological stew that is sent into a woman during sex, okay, conventionally, to bring forth the baby. And among these proteins rather, the PSA, which is the prostate specific antigen, has been implicated to be the main trigger. Now, the reason why I have to mention that is the question someone will now tell me is, does that mean that if a man has high PSA, it means the wife is very likely to have seminal plasma hypersensitivity, SPH? No. In fact, I should just use this as a means of giving an education beyond the topic. High PSA points more to differential diagnosis of prostate cancer for the man, not for the woman. Okay, and this does not mean that a man that has high PSA, the wife, like I mentioned earlier, we have the experience of SPH, which we are talking about, the semen allergy. So what is the risk factor, or what are those things that can predispose a woman to having seminal plasma hypersensitivity? Ladies and gentlemen, the exact cause is not known. The predisposing factor is not known. However, it has been discovered as an association that women with history of atopy, in other words, if as a woman you have the history probably from childhood that you are a very sensitive individual, sensitive to kind of soap, you notice when there is change in the soap, there is a reaction, rash, you have to deal with itching, there is this tiny swelling across, redness on the body. If you have those tendencies, what has been discovered is there is a higher chance of having what we call the systemic manifestation of SPH. And I'm going to explain. So if you remember, the definition says localized. The definition says localized and or systemic allergic symptoms accompanying exposure to the protein component of seminal plasma, that is the ejaculate. So what it means is there is a local government and there is a state. Okay, let me explain that. So the vagina is the local government in our story. The state is the entire body. When the sperm is ejected, okay, the local government can be under attack. Itching, swelling of the vulva, irritation, pain, redness, itching could happen. But in some cases, it could become so severe that it's not limited to the local government. This time around, it involves the states, okay? It's like a riot breaking out in particular local government, and before you know it, it's spread. So this time around, the lady is having, rash all over the body, itching all over the body. It could be so terrible, you could see the people with, the tongue swelling up, the lips swelling up, and some could even enter into what we call a sort of angioedema, whereby the throat, gets swollen and therefore difficulty with breathing sets in. Some could even present with abdominal pain, an unexplainable abdominal pain. Now, you will agree with me that definitely that means SPH is a common cause of pain during sex as well as irritation of the vulva that can be misinterpreted for infection. So this is one of the reasons why we always advise that as much as possible, consult your doctor. okay, not a chemist, not Google, not your friend who is not, okay, medically sound or trained when you have issues as regards your health generally. I wanted to say, the genitals, but generally as regards your health. Number 3, number 4, whatsoever number, people might be asking, does that mean that a woman with SPH cannot conceive? The answer is not completely no. Okay, and I'm going to explain this. So, SPH is not the cause of any form of infertility, but it could be an enabling or a reinforcing factor that promotes certain things, and I want to explain that. So, you know that when we define fertility, we say, okay, inability to conceive by a couple following exposure to adequate, penetrative, and ejaculatory sex or coitus. Sorry. Okay. Coitus, medical term, sex, our language. Okay. After a period of a year. I've seen couples who believe that after the first sex, pregnancy should be the next thing. Like after just one trial. And I'm like, no, that's not. You need to have this sex. In fact, the definition of infertility in some instances even put into consideration the timing around which sex happens. Okay, so ovulatory, okay, right time, and all those sorts, which is outside this discussion. But what I'm only trying to say, it means you have to have regular sex or regular sexual exposure. So with the presence of SPH, it means that this couple, the wife may find it very difficult, okay, to have sex, and so refrain from the adequate sexual exposure, and that in turn could favor other factors contributory to infertility in that case, but directly by itself is never a cause for infertility. The other thing I would like to talk about regards SPH. Okay, so what is the scientific explanation? The fact is, apart from, yes, it has been discovered that it is a reaction to the protein component of the seminal plasma, there is no concrete explanation for why this happened. The recent explanation provided is that SPH, which is a seminal plasma hypersensitivity or semen allergy, is a product of evolutionary process, in that every sperm has a genetic signature, that means which emanates from the man, and for every ejaculation this signature is imprinted, and once the body of the lady sees or calculates or views that kind of potential mate as that which is unfavorable, this reaction is triggered. That's the hypothesis put forward, which has not been accepted, but of course is in the learning space and pool. And so that's that about that as regards what is there any scientific explanation concerning the experience or the occurrence of semen allergy? And that's that about that. Now, I know Shade, Ashabi, Abike, Tolu, Toyin listening are beginning to say things like, hey, wala no the finish. So now, person don't even know if the kind of partner coming is going to cause this kind of discomfort for them. Or a particular man is saying, oh, who knows, maybe the girl I'm going to have is going to react to the protein component of my sperm. Technically, remember, we are not just talking about sperm, we are talking about semen. All right, so please, let me state clearly. Semen allergy is not a free ticket to start boarding the train of fornication. Neither is it a good excuse for you to taste the wheat bread of adultery. It is manageable. Okay. In fact, it has been discovered that for so many people who might have had the experience one time or the other, but never know what it is, they will tell you that initially it was painful, or they have this kind of, okay, unnecessary, unexplainable discomfort following unprotected sex with their husband, but gets better. Okay, so it means it's tolerable for many people. Okay, over time things get better, especially with exposure. Okay, they call that desensitization, and we are coming to that kind. We are coming to that. Okay, however, so the methods, and I've mentioned that the gold standard, okay, of making the diagnosis is you will discover that whenever a barrier method is used as a contraceptive, that is, condom is used, specifically condom now, because there's so many other types of barrier methods. The woman will tell you that anytime my husband is using the condom, I don't feel this. I feel I understand sex is wonderful, but once it's unprotected, it's going to be a tug of war. Okay, so the first thing is for those who have completed the number in terms of family, you have all your children, but you still experience this. We encourage that sometimes you make use, the husband make use of the condom. But where this sounds like a taboo, for God's sake, I'm not cheating, okay, I have a wife, I don't feel, okay, enough pleasurable stimulation when I use condom. This is a man complaining now. Even for some women, they will tell you, then what's the way forward? So the first thing that has been proposed and some people make use of is there is a particular group of drug they take, okay, before and or after sex to reduce this reaction or to prevent this reaction from taking place. The second thing is what we now call graded vaginal desensitization. This means that step by step, okay, gradually you expose that particular local government to the visit of this particular stranger till that local government acclimatize to the presence of the stranger. In other words, you fractionate, in other words, extract the protein in the semen, dilute it, and continually introduce it to the vagina. In other words, they say in our local parlance, you must have heard it in some songs, what does not kill you makes you stronger. That's not always true, okay, but that's the kind of philosophy explored when it comes to management of SPH. In other words, it's not going to kill you. So if you keep on lifting the weight, the first few weeks can be very difficult, but very soon you develop the muscle and you get better at it. That's the kind of explanation to that. Okay. However, for some people, the systemic reaction could be serious. The systemic reaction could be as serious as someone the worst kind of reaction you've ever seen to a medication. Yes, difficulty with breathing, the airway, okay, getting narrowed because of swelling. It could be that serious. So for those people, there are two forms of desensitization. There is one, of course, I said degraded diluted semen introduction into the vagina. The other one is they were going to extract the protein from the semen of that husband and they will inject it underneath the skin. Okay, a way of stimulating the immune system of this woman to be able to get used to that particular component in that husband's semen. Amazingly, with desensitization process, even though it's very effective, there is a catch. You must ensure there is frequent sex. I know the men are happy now. In other words, you won't say because of desensitization, oh, okay, we just have sex. So you need to ensure that the body is exposed continually and frequently to the semen, okay, especially to the pro. Of course, you cannot physically judge, oh, the protein is coming, oh, the protein is not here. So the lady, even under the treatment, must frequently get exposed to sex, okay, and that's that about SPH. And like I create a balance is not an excuse for promiscuity. No. It's not an excuse to be promiscuous. Okay. You will agree with me. Sex outside marriage comes, or having multiple sexual partner comes with more emotional, psychological, not to even talk about medical and spiritual damage, okay, than trying to get down and fix the case of SPH. Thank you very much. I believe that you can always drop your questions on the channel and definitely we'll get back to you.
Not everything is village people. Seek knowledge, seek understanding. The phone is there. What do you use your internet for? Do you understand? So it might not even be a grand problem like you're thinking it to be. It might just be something very little. In this case, it is something little. And you can imagine someone having miscarriage over this little thing because your antibodies have been fighting your husband's semen. So please, let us do better. And of course, medical professionals and counselor generals, don't be fast to think that people's spouses are checking out. It could be something totally different. And this I have found out after 10 years of marriage, and I hope to share it with you. Thank you for staying the time with me. Bye.